Okay. So each PowerPoint will have what the topics are, what the goals are, and the objectives, just to kind of focus you. Those are what you need to focus on within each week. Um, and the first couple weeks are going to be like difference between law and ethics isn't theoretical, but a lot of it's going to be talking about values and how you manage value conflicts, and then different theories with laws and ethics, or not with laws, but with ethics. And then we'll start getting into the actual ethics and how you make those decisions and how that's guided. Some of that is on this PowerPoint. It talks about the NASW is who develops our ethics. And in the PowerPoint, it goes into more detail, but just to give you guys a brief summary, there's a lot of reasons why we do it. One, we need a framework so everyone's kind of doing consistently the same thing. It also protects us from having legislators get involved in social work, because if they feel like the profession is trying to manage itself, they're less likely to impose into what we do. It also helps protect us from lawsuits. So you can get sued even if you're not doing therapy. So if you're a social worker, like if you're at the county, they can sue you personally as well, and the county. So I would encourage you, if once you get your master's, it's cheap to get malpractice insurance, just to have it just in case. Likely they're going after the county, not you. Because you're probably like, all I got is hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt from school, so that's what you can do. But it is helpful, and then you want to make sure that you're keeping up to date with ethics and law, because it's your responsibility. So if something happens and you're like, well, I didn't know that, they don't care. And laws change a lot. Ethics generally stay pretty stable. Laws change all the time. Because laws, not only is it legislation, but it's also the way they interpret law. So if there's a shift, like, have you guys had talked about TerraSoft, correct, in other classes? The TerraSoft case? Yes?
No, not in class.
Okay, so TerraSoft, we'll talk about it. By the end of your program, you'll just be over TerraSoft. Basically, it's duty to warn. And so what happened was a therapist, one of his clients told him he wanted to kill this girl. He didn't do anything. He did, but not to the degree he should have. And so she ended up being murdered. And so through a civil lawsuit, the decision was that we need to warn the victim, the police, write a letter. It's funny because we talk a lot about TerraSoft in our programs. Very rarely do you actually do them. Suicide assessment, homicide assessment, not talked about a lot. You're going to do those a lot. Because people are going to want to die. Full moon comes, everyone's going to want to die. Your coworker, all your friends. And it's always like 4 o'clock on Friday. You're like, of course, this is when you want to die. So I will focus on TerraSoft, but I really want you guys to feel comfortable with suicide and homicide and the pieces that you need to do to cover yourself. If someone's playing a game and they're not going to tell you pieces, you can't do anything about that. And don't get caught up in their game. Oh, do you want to kill? Maybe. Okay, well, do you have a plan? Do you have means? Like, don't get. I see people do that where it becomes like a power struggle. You just go off what you have, because someone could say they're not and kill themselves. You know. So what you want to be careful, because it's the people that play the games with suicide that people spend way too much time on, and it's the people that don't that they do it and they kill themselves first time. So you always take it serious. It's always addressed. And I'll teach you guys how to address it to cover yourself, so that if something happens, you did cover them. You did what you could. But you can't make people tell you anything. So what I want to talk about today, since it's a little bit more, it's not as black and white, and it could maybe have discussion. I know you guys probably worked all day, so you're like, I don't want to talk at all, but we'll go into it is values, ethics, and morality. So this is more theoretical. So with the way that ethics come about is, first we have values. So the values that we have then inform the ethics, and then we'll talk a little bit about morality once we define these. So our values, even our personal values, are in our society contributes to that. Like, we don't generally have original ideas on our own because we're like a fish in water. We don't realize we're in water. We're just taking on whatever society's feeding us. So there's societal values that usually then impact us and inform our values. So it's kind of like, have you ever looked at things historically and think, like, how were people okay with what was happening? Like slavery. Well, we don't realize how much our society actually informs what's right, what's wrong, our values, everything. You know, we don't generally have a lot of independent perspectives because we're always kind of trying to conform to keep our village, you know? So we have our own personal values, and we need to be aware of those because they are going to conflict with other people's. And then we're going to have professional values, which could potentially conflict with our personal values. So then we have to figure out how am I going to navigate that. It's not so much if that happens, just when. You need to have a plan. You're going to. Like, you're going to have some kind of social work value that you don't necessarily agree with. But when you're working in the context of being a social worker, you do need to work. You need to comply with that. You will definitely have people that you don't agree with their values, and maybe their values actually make your job a lot harder, and you're already stressed out. And so you have to figure out how am I going to maneuver that so I'm not punishing them. Because I see that all the time with social workers. They just make it harder. It's like this real passive-aggressive way. Like, they kind of are helping, but they don't like this person. They're not going to go. It's like we need to provide everyone with the best service we can. Whether we like them or not, that's not relevant. So we have to figure out a strategy for ourselves of how we're going to do that because we are human. We have feelings. We have our own issues. We have people hurt our feelings. Maybe sometimes we want to hurt our clients. I mean, there's like a lot of things that are going on. So you want to figure out a strategy of what am I going to do? I don't know if anyone will actually do this in class, but I know when I took this class in graduate school, there was a lot of very heated conversations. If that does happen, I'll probably move it back because mainly the ethics are pretty clear. When we get into the attacking each other, that's not even about ethics anymore. That's like some kind of personal whatever. But one of the challenges is that oftentimes in the classes I was in, the people that maybe had values that didn't totally match with social work, if they ever brought it up, they were just completely attacked. Well, how are they ever going to look at those? Because what do you do when you get attacked? But you're digging harder. So I'd like sit there in class thinking, why are we doing this? You're attacking them. They're never going to hear what you're saying. And you're attacking them because you said they shouldn't feel that way. Like, the logic is just not there. One of the things with values, ethics, and really just with social work in general, figure out how to pull your emotionality out of the picture. Because your emotionality is what's going to screw you and shoot you in the foot. So, I'll give you an example. So I have a sibling, and we're both gay, and we're very different, though. Like, our personalities, our temperaments, everything quite different. So one time he was talking to me, and he's like, people just don't like me because I'm gay. He just kept going on, and I finally had to stop him. Like, they don't like you because you're a jerk. I didn't say that. I said it's not actually, maybe a little bit, but most of it is the way that you approach people. And so the thing that we don't understand is that oftentimes it's not what we're saying, but how we're saying it. I think all the time, but just maybe it's not all the time. So when you're working with people, you have to figure out how to pull your own emotionality, your reactiveness out of it. Your need to defend what you're doing. You don't need to defend anything. If a policy, which you have no control over, dictates blah, 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 how is this a personal attack on you? They can make it feel that way, and they do, and they're pretty good. Like, sometimes you're like, man, you get extra points just for that. That was pretty good. But ultimately, you can't control all those things. You know, you can't control the fact that you probably can't control your own life. How are you going to control theirs and the policies that have happened? Like, really? And so it's learning how to pull away from the personalization of things, because that will burn you out. Nothing, like if they have me teach psychodynamics again, when you learn psychodynamics, nothing's about you actually, ever. It's about people, their own maladaptive patterns, and their recreations. They make it sound like it's about you, but it's totally not. And the sooner you can understand that, the easier you'll find joy in your work. Because you're working with people who need help, that have maladaptive patterns, and it's actually documented that they're not functioning. And then we're like, I can't believe they said that. Really? Like, I remember when I worked with severely mentally ill adults, people were like, can you believe they did that? Kind of. That's how they come to work with us. They kind of have to do these things. But every time they're just completely shocked. Can you believe they came on Friday? Uh-huh. I don't plan anything on Friday until about 9, 10 o'clock, because I know somebody's going to come. 4:58. Is Mike there? And then I'm going to get a cigarette first. Of course you are. You checked in and you left. 5:05. Hey, they're out here and they're bleeding. Oh, okay. Looks like we're not going out tonight. Me and them are. We're going to the hospital. How fun. So you want to identify what are your values. It's super important. And even if maybe your values, like we can intellectually have values, but emotionally they don't actually match. Like, I don't know how many of you guys are religious. Maybe you're totally in line with the religious belief, but in your day-to-day life, you're like, oops, I forgot. And it's real hard to do it. So there's the intellectual values, like this is how I'd like to be. I'd like to be easygoing and loving and caring. And then there's the reality. So you want to know the reality, not to pick yourself apart or feel like a bad person, but you got to work with what you got. You know, if you think, like, it's interesting to watch people describe themselves, because that's who they wish they were. That's not who they are. If you're not sure, just go on dates. It's like, oh, I'm like this, and you're like, uh-oh, no, that defense mechanism indicates that you are not like that, and we're going to find out. So you want to figure out where you are and then work with that. Where are the pitfalls going to come? Who are you going to have a hard time working with? And not saying, well, I just won't. You will. And so you need a strategy to figure out, what am I going to do then? If I have someone and I don't like those people, or I don't agree with that, or I'm really triggered by this. Because then at least you're prepared. Cut your stress down. You're like, yep, I don't like those people. So what's going to be my plan so that I don't let that screw me helping them? Because this isn't about me. You know, I probably don't like everyone, if I'm really honest, you know. So we have our values, but then we have professional values, and so we have to understand the professional values, because when we're working in capacity as a social worker, we have to adopt those. Whether they're ours or not, it's part of the job. You adopt a certain aspect. So an example could be, like, how many of you guys have kids? So is there ever ways that you relate that you would never relate in front of your kids? Because there's mom aspect or dad aspect, and then there's like, I'm sick of this, right? So you have different aspects. So sometimes people can hear that and go, well, I have to be who I am. No, you're just trying to make it difficult. There are certain ways we relate in certain contexts. When we're a social worker, we develop social work aspect, and this social work aspect has these. We'll get to the value. They have these specific values. Whether you have them when you clock out, that doesn't matter. It just matters that when you're working in that context, you need to adopt those. You need to figure out a way. It's helpful if you adopt them throughout your life, because it's really hard to pretend, because it always comes back out. So, like, I work with people. And we work with pretty difficult children, and we move away from punishment, because from the research, it's not effective. Most people love punishment. I mean, our whole, like, all our media is just like, punish, punish. Everyone must be punished and shamed. So they have a hard time implementing that, because they don't agree with it. But it's like, this is what you have to do when you're working there. The people that actually start to look at that and try to integrate in their life, they do it easier. The people that try it on, they can do it okay, but you can tell that they don't really believe it because they really want to punish. They like come to me and they're like, I got to talk to you. And they're saying all these things in nice terms, but really it's like, should we beat them? Is that what we're going to do? Okay, that's what we're going to do. So from our values, so societal values influence our personal values. Societal values also influence our professional values because we're working within a society. So our values have to be similar. There can be differences, though, in how we focus. So I think overall, and this could totally be debatable in our current climate, but overall I would say our society believes in equality. You guys don't need to comment on anything, right? But generally, I would say people, like, it's America, land of the free. That's like the generic perspective. So we adopt that, but as social work, we focus in a different way, though, because we're looking at who's being discriminated against, oppressed, who has barriers. So it's the same focus, but it's the same way of looking at things, but it's kind of honed in. So as social workers, we share that value of equality, but what we're looking at, we've come hopefully to the realization that things are not equal for people. That people have different kinds of intersectionality, discrimination. Life's hard. One challenge, because you might find, I found in social work, people that just completely disagree with that, is to present it in a way that we're not saying that your life's good, everyone's life sucks. You have privilege, but your life still sucks. It's not like you have privilege and your life's fantastic, because that's people, when you tell someone you have privilege, they're like, excuse me? I cry myself to sleep every night. That's not what we're saying. We're saying your life sucks, there's just less blocks to jump over, but it still sucks. Because when you tell someone, you start talking about privilege, it usually elicits shame and defensiveness. So be really skillful. I watch people talk about that, and I'm like, you're never going to help this person see that, ever. Because you're just attacking them. They're just going to, this is why I don't like those people, blah, 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 blah. So what we're looking at is trying to understand that privilege and also trying to understand our own privilege. So even if you are ethnically diverse, maybe you have different levels of ability, you have different gender expression, different socioeconomic. The fact that you're in graduate school gives you privilege. So I remember one time, it was like my first year teaching, and I love talking about race, ethnicity, class. And people were like, oh yeah, but you don't face all that anymore because now you got more education. You got to recognize your own privilege. Like, I'm a person of color, but most of my friends have master's degrees. That's ridiculous. Most people don't even have friends that have bachelors. So it's always recognizing I have my own privilege that makes me disconnected from my consumer base. Even if I grew up the same way, it's not the same anymore. Like, don't go into it like that, because then you will miss important things. And you will miss the consumer's experience. So I'm going off from there. So we look at our values, we look at our professional values. From the values, ethics are created. So ethics, the seed of ethics is values. It's really important, not really important, I say that a lot. Probably nothing's really important. When you're approaching your social work practice, to hold, what is my reason for doing this? Because I see a lot of people go through their social work practice, they get burned out and everything's a task, and they miss why they're doing it. If you start doing that, stop doing social work. Because if I have a task list, you've lost connection with your values probably. Because you're like, this is getting in the way of my court report. That's probably, the electricity's going to go out in a few minutes, so I've got to get it in. So really check that for yourself. Like, looking at what is my professional values, but why am I in an MSW program? And how can I reconnect to that frequently? Because you're not. Because things are going to blow up all the time. And you're going to start connecting to, this is crazy. Why am I doing this? I hate this. Then you're going to get a boss lots of bosses. So really think about when we talk about values, what are your values and what pushed you to come into this, and how can you keep connecting to that? Because you'll forget. You'll be bombarded with calls and demands and all these different things, and then you kind of lose your joy at that point. So ethics work the same way. There's societal ethics, but with social work, our ethics might be slightly different in how we what we emphasize, what's a priority, those kind of things. Morality is interesting, and I think it's something to think about. Because generally, how do you make friends usually? Family, you're just born in. You're like, can I avoid you? But how do you make friends? Like, how do you choose the people that are your friends? So one of the things that we really want to try to avoid is thinking that our experience is universal. Because we manufacture our experience. We only hang out with people that support it. What happens if they disagree? Deuces. We surround ourselves. See, this is how things are. This is how you should believe. No, that's how this small fraction that you've now manipulated into being near you to support your delusions. That's what's happening. There's a lot of other perspectives out there. So we do this a lot with morality. It's principles or rules of conduct that define standards. The interesting thing with morality is that if people actually could move away, get through their childhood issues stuff, a lot of times they don't even believe what they learned. But it was infused with, this is how you're loved, right? If you want to be loved, you have to blah, 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 blah. So there's this like primitive part that's like this. That's why people get so emotional with morality. They're emotional because it's that core, like, I won't have a village anymore. Like, I will be, like, it's so much deeper than what people, like, are talking about, you know? So we're just infused with all of these standards that are deemed acceptable. And we get these messages as a kid. So to kind of illustrate that, hopefully, just from a practical perspective, there's a family that I work with, and they are, I'm doing family therapy with them. It's a tricky family. All families are. You're like, I can barely do one. How am I going to do four? Like, come on. So the parent is like real, like, they just need to stop doing this. I love when parents do that. Oh, that's all. Well, maybe if you ask them nicely. They just need to stop being bad. Oh my gosh. Can I give you an LCSW? So I have the parent, and they're just saying that, and I'm like, okay, but at some point there has to be more to it than this. Like, I get it. If they change this would be fine, but would it really be fine? Because you guys got all these problems underneath that you're not addressing. It's not just about did they break the wheelbarrow. There's content, process. Content is what we're talking about. Process is what's going on underneath. So you see content, process all the time in your workplace or with your consumers. You're talking about, maybe you're talking about, I know you guys are at the county, so maybe you're talking about fair hearings. Have you ever had to talk about your fair hearings and how emotional it gets? Never? Oh, I'm going to take you to hearing. Okay. Oh, you just wait. You just wait, yeah. Like, they don't agree with your decision. Oh, I'm going to call the board of supervisors. And you're like, well, here's their number because they changed one of them, just in case. The content is talking about that, but there's a lot of emotional stuff. That's the process. And so that's what happens with morality is sometimes people are not aware of the process. They're just aware of the content. So they're just like, this is bad, this is good, oh. But underneath, there's a lot of like, I need to be heard, I need to be good enough. Like, there's just a lot going on. People are pretty complex. We need to be careful in understanding that because we work with diverse populations, there's a lot of versions of morality. And ours is not necessarily correct. Universally, it can be correct for us. I'm not saying that you need to change your values, change your morality, but sometimes we put ourselves in such a little bubble that we're like shocked at what we find. You know, like, oh, I can't believe they do that. Well, I have kind of a bad sense of humor, so if it's really bad, you can just put it on my evaluation. It would be like when people come in, I can't believe they hurt their kids. Well, it's like we're working for CPS. Oh, we are. Uh-oh. People do hurt their kids all the time. Like, we're like shocked all the time. We need to figure out how to not be shocked. And what that takes is for us to realize that our morality, our values, is just ours. There's lots of versions. And we have to figure out, how is it, if this is the case, if we're working with someone with different values, how can I understand them differently without villainizing them? So one of my favorite cases that I've ever had, tortured and murdered a bunch of animals. And I foster animals, so I love animals. I worked at a pet store. And I watched people just disgusted by him. School's calling me, what are we going to do? Well, you're going to give him free lunch because he's in foster care, and you're going to teach him things. But he killed animals. Well, don't dress up like a kitty cat then when you're teaching. But they're just like freaked out, like heads of things calling me, so freaked out. Like, he's a psychopath. Okay. And so we're like, okay, we have to have special meetings, blah, 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 blah. So as he came, it was actually really interesting because it made me start to question my morality or my values, because I thought, he's a psychopath, but there's people that hunt animals and then cut their heads off and put them on their wall, but they're appropriate. I'm not making a judgment if you do that. If you're like, my whole wall is cheetah heads or something. Where does it shift? Where does it shift from killing a kitty cat and then burying the body, because that's probably what he did, to I'm going to murder it, cut its head off, stuff it, put little pretty marbles in its eyes, and keep it on my wall? Like, I don't understand. Like, I really started thinking about, like, what... We don't question a lot of stuff that doesn't actually make a lot of sense. Or if it's someone, like, people would usually be talking about it when they were, like, eating lunch, so they'd be eating meat. And I'm like, when does it shift from, like, piggy to kitty? Mm-hmm. Like, where does that actually happen? So this youth made me really think about those things. Doesn't mean I agree with murdering animals. I still foster animals. But you have to figure out how to be able to kind of pull away your emotionality to understand the person, because you can't help them if you don't understand them. If you're thinking, what I see a lot of social workers, they think, if I did this is the kind of person I would need to be. That's not a good perspective, because they're not you. So one day, time went on, and people just thought he was just this monster, and I didn't think he really was. So one day the time came where I could open it up to that. And he would mess with people, and I think he'd mess with people because they messed with him. So they call, can you believe he said that? I'm like, he is messing with you. You got chomp written all over your forehead, and you're a psychologist. Like, you got more education than me. Chomp right there. Stop reacting. So we were at Costco getting something, and I walked out and I said, I've really been moved by you. And he's like, wow, like scary move. Like, no, moved by you. Why? Well, because it's really made me question, what do I think? Because you're supposedly a monster. And we had a good relationship, so he's not thinking like, yeah, you think I'm a monster. And then I brought up all those points. Where does it shift? I don't understand. Like, it's really making me question, like, what I value and what I, like, maybe it's just all been, I don't know. And so he started talking, and then he said, and you don't need to do this, but I said, can you walk me through everything? Like, I want to know. What were you thinking? So it wasn't like, what were you thinking? I was like, what were you thinking? Like, I want to know. I have an idea. There's all these assumptions with antisocial individuals. There's the research. I'm like, I want to see if any of that's actually true. So if you could help me out, let's just start. So I'm not going to go through the graphic details, but he walks me through each piece. And then I ask him, so then what were you thinking? What was happening inside? Instead of just focusing on, how could you do that to Fluffy? I'm like, what was happening inside then when this happened or that happened? It was actually really interesting because it brought out a lot of like themes and different things that I could use in treatment. And probably was the only time he was ever able to just talk about it. Because everyone else was just like horrified and shut it down. that shifted our therapeutic relationship. I left it alone for a long time. Because sometimes when you open people up a lot, you got to back off for a while. Because everyone has an intimacy barrier, and we don't realize that's when people like open up a lot and they never come back to you. It's because you're being way too intimate. You got to have some like mellow time. It can't be like every session like time to break open your childhood. You got to do like we're gonna break it open and then we're gonna talk about Subway because they got a new $5 Subway. Like you got to break it up. You can't. They won't come back even if you're like that was the best session. Or they come back after a good session. They're like, how's it going? Oh, it's okay. Really, because you discussed some pretty significant sexual abuse that went on for 18 years last time. It's just hot outside. Okay. But people need that. So way later on, before he left, he had a session. And he started sobbing, and he's like, I'm a monster. I don't think he ever would have had that if we didn't have that conversation because he was so defensive. Because people were letting their morality keep them from helping him. That's kind of a problem. And I see that a lot. So with morality, we need to understand that everyone's going to have a different version of morality that they deemed acceptable. And you have to remember, too, that how they were informed also is more complicated because it's contingent on them being cared for as a kid. So you have a lot to battle. Like, I work with kids now, and although we make great efforts to try, a lot of times they grew up in a different environment where the things that were valued are not what we're presenting. And we're trying to tell them, betray your family and adopt our morality. Is it shocking that they don't? Because, I'll probably be there until I go on medical leave and then finally move to another office. So we want to think about that with morality. People have things they deem acceptable, but there's a lot to that. And for you to challenge that, you're challenging a lot too. And so you want to figure out more how to just be like a learner. Tell me about that. Tell me about how that works. Tell me about why that's working. Not like, oh, no, that's not what we do. Sometimes you do if you have policies. Like, if I went out and someone's like, in my country, we can, stab our kids. I think someone told me that once. Ultimately, had to be like, but we're not there and you can't. But I do respect that you have a different culture, but, like, Johnny needs a lot of stitches. So we're not going to be able to do that anymore. So we want to kind of contemplate that, our own values, the fact that everyone has different morality. How are we going to manage that? Because you can't help or connect with people if you're totally rejecting everything they are. That just doesn't work. Like if you think of someone that they're like, who changed your life? They're not going to be like, the person who completely rejected everything I stood for changed my life. So if you really want to help people, you have to figure out where is the common ground. How are they thinking? Could that make sense? With the kid that I was telling you about with the killing animals, if I could pull myself away from that, it did make sense. It actually made a lot of sense psychologically for me. Because you have this kid who never had an outlet for their anger because they had this overbearing, abusive mom. So everything was pushed down. It was not safe because if he said anything, he would get beaten and then he wouldn't be loved and that's all he had. So it kind of made sense that he picked things that couldn't fight back. Because you can't just push stuff down, it has to come out. So for a decade, push, then I'm like, oh, that makes sense why you killed them.
And that's how he felt,
And he recreated his own trauma. So if we think trauma-informed, yes, some people have experiences of trauma, sexual abuse, physical abuse, and they would never do that, but a lot of people recreate it in which they're the perp. Because there's a psychological control aspect. It has nothing to do with beating people or molesting people. It's the fact that you get to recreate the thing that really damaged you, but this time you're in control. So we have to think about those things with morality and values. There's a lot of complex pieces in people that make them think and believe the way that they believe. So we just want to keep that in mind, recognize that how are we going to work with people with different moral perspectives. Ultimately, I don't think that our client should ever know where we stand. I think if they know where we stand, we don't have good boundaries. Because this isn't about us. Social work is not therapy, not about giving advice. Because you know your advice didn't work too. Like if you go back, you're like, oh yeah, it wasn't too good. So those are the three components of a lot of times they're interchanged, but there is some subtle differences between values, ethics, and morality. So just to briefly recap this one, so our values is what's good or desirable. Our ethics are what's right and correct. So those are the subtle differences. When we have professional ethics, it's basically indicating that if we did it right or correct or not. This is just, well, it would be great if you could. If you could be a kind person. Do you have to be a kind person to be a social worker? Nope. And get all the same stuff done. That's a value, but the ethic is, you do have to have appropriate boundaries or something like that. Like that is something that if you're not doing that, you're not doing social work from the ethical perspective. So in this slide, there's a bunch of ethics. You can go on NESW. I kind of summarize them for you guys because there's a lot to them. Because we're going to go in depth into a lot of them as the quarter moves on. So the last piece I want to talk about before we go, and if you guys can, if I am like going over, just be like, shh, quiet time, and then I'll I'm so used to touchscreen that I keep wanting. Okay, so I'll let you guys look at the different values and ethics. This slide actually shows us how, from that value, this is the ethic that's created. So just briefly to go through, service is our value. Our primary goal is to help people in need and address social problems. So the way that might look in reality is maybe sometimes we have to do things above and beyond what our job entails. We don't have to, like we're not going to lose our license if we don't, but that's the social work value. Maybe we do some pro bono stuff. So I'm trained in EMDR. If a sex assault, like people that were sexually trafficked, they're like, can you do it? I would volunteer my time. EMDR is real, you charge like $300 an hour. But that's a social work value of service. For a population that's disenfranchised, most of the people that need the really good stuff are never going to get it because it's the people that have money and insurance that get it. So it might be that we have to go outside of what we need to do to really help a person. Not to the point where we're like destroying or something, but you know what I mean. Like if that's our value, that's an ethical principle, it might, in reality, it might look like us going extra steps to help bridge consumers. Social justice, our ethical principles, we challenge social injustice. Have you ever challenged social injustice? Real awkward.
That's my faith.
It cannot be fun. I remember moving into a job and I just would listen in treatment team. Oh, there's black kids, brown kids, white kids. There's obviously mixed, but like just for that.
You got 3 types of kids to work with.
3 types of kids. So the 2 people that were they knew everything, which is fine. I would notice that when they talked about the brown and black kids, they bring up a lot of like criminal thinking, conduct. And then when they talk about the white kids, they'd be like, they just have attachment issues. Oh gosh. And so I just every time I'm like, maybe it's me. I'm a little sensitive with that stuff. So I actually kept tallies at certain points. Oh, okay. So then I brought it up. That was rough. But for me, that's an important piece. It didn't make me get fired, but it made it real rough for a long time. Because who wants to be known as a racist? Even people, KKK, I'm not a racist. I just love these gorgeous white hats and fire. That's all. Fire. So no one's like, yes, I'm a racist. We're all actually racist if we're honest with ourselves because we are a product of our society. Our values come from our society. It's infused in us, certain things. So sometimes challenging social injustice can be really uncomfortable. Do you have to do it? Are you going to get fired? No. But if you're living true social work, so if you want to find joy in social work, you need to live the values. If you just want to get like I's dotted and T's crossed and warrants signed, do that, but you won't find like the joy part of social work. Dignity and worth of person. So seeing that this person is a person. So I'll tell you the story. I'll probably cry. I probably cry a lot, so I'm really sorry. So I remember I was working with this guy. I worked with a lot of homeless folks, and so I said, I don't know why I asked him. I said, when did you know you were homeless? Like, of course, if you don't have a home, but like when he talked about being homeless, he wasn't just talking about not having a home. There was like a certain, and he told me one time. He said when people stopped seeing me, like they just didn't see me and I was right there, that's when I was homeless. And so we can't get like that with people. Everyone's has dignity. Everyone is a person and they need help. And even if it's like someone that, like if you work with people that are hurting other people, like don't lose, if you lose that, you're not doing social work anymore. You're just becoming like everybody else. Importance of human relationships. This can be hard because with like the law of physics, like attracts like, sometimes our consumers live in environments they're not going to find different. And so we're like, oh wait, we're doing all this work and you're going to go back to that? Well, where are they going to go back to? So it's remembering that human relationships are very important. People are driven by that. One of the things that they made me take out, which sucks, because they said you guys got a lot of cultural competency, but I found this article that talked about values based on class. And so one of the things that, for me when I read it, I'm like, I'm such an ass after I read it. It talked about lower socioeconomic individuals. They value the connections because they might need help. And so it talked about a consumer who keeps missing appointments because people need help moving. Well, the reason they're doing that is because when they need it, the other person will do it for them. That's not what we see, right? We see, oh, you're just wasting my time, my precious time. I'm not giving you another appointment. Well, there's a different value base. Like you're just, because you're not that. So you don't think like that. You think, you know, because it talked about higher class, middle class, lower class. And when they broke it down, you're like, oh, that's why. Like that's why different people do these different things, because they have a different value set. And then we misinterpret it and then villainize them or whatever if it's Minnesota. So we need to be trustworthy. We need to have integrity. So what that might look like, never tell people you can do stuff. Ever. Even if you really want to, because you know you won't. Because as soon as you get back, it'll be like everyone's on fire. So tell people, hey, because what most disenfranchised people are looking for is how you're going to let them down like everybody else. So you could do all this good stuff. You showed up all these times. The one time, oh, you're in trouble. You said, what about like the 50 other times? No. I can't trust you. So you tell people, I'll try, but I might not be able to. If you tell someone something, you don't do it, acknowledge it. Don't just push it under the rug. They'll say, like I remember, hey, I told you to call you and I didn't yesterday. I'm so sorry. Oh, it's nothing. The funny thing is, if I wouldn't have said that down the road, when they get mad at me, they'll be like, do you remember July 7th at 11:12? Because I do. You said you'd call me, you never did. You never, and you're like, really? So just acknowledge stuff, like your failures, like, hey, I'm sorry, I told you to do this. I hope that you don't feel like I don't think you're important. If you get really busy and you have those like borderlines, I had a lot of borderline, I would tell them, I could see you thinking that you're not important because you didn't get a call. I do want to just acknowledge that I had a lot of other stuff coming up and that you are actually important. They might still freak out and tell you they hate you and all that stuff, but start to acknowledge those things so that people can trust you, because your relationship's everything. It doesn't matter how interventions, it's your relationship that actually creates a change for the consumer. I keep wanting to change that one because I'm used to using it. Okay. Oh, you guys are 620, huh? Well, you guys can go through. I will, if I can this weekend, I will try to re-record it. There is one up there though. It's about 45 minutes where I go through the PowerPoint and I talk about it. And then next week we're going to talk more about theory because your paper that you're going to write. And I'll get you guys ready for it. It won't be just like, sometimes teachers have like really vague descriptions, and then when you do it, they're like, "This is a C," and you're like, "But I asked you." And they're like, "But you should have known." That's what I meant. You're worse than the client. So we'll talk about that. The main thing with the paper is we'll have a values dilemma. And if it isn't a dilemma for you, because it's going to be hard when that hits home for everyone, just imagine it is. And then think, what I want to see is how you navigate having a values conflict. And then being able to identify the ethical principles and legal principles that you would use. So not just saying like, well, if they, whatever, I don't agree with that, I would just respect them. No, I want you to talk about, I get consultation, I talk to my supervisor. Like I want you to connect those ethical principles so that I see that you know how to like integrate them into practice. So that's it. I don't like that it's the short bit. It is what it is. And then in about 2 weeks, I'll start doing the practice ones. What? I'll start doing the practice quizzes. Totally don't have to watch them, but if you do, I'm very audio, so I don't learn by reading PowerPoints. I need to actually hear it. So that's just for those people that they learn like that. If you don't worry about it. And the midterms, take home, the guest lecture, I'm going to have to record it, so I'll post it. So we'll just do like a lecture, because it's 3 hours. And then the final will be here, but it'll be open note. And usually what I do with exams is I give a very specific framework of what I need you to focus on. Not just like, learn everything. And then like none of it's in there. You're like,